Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Luke Mikic. He bills himself on Twitter as a 9-to-5 escape artist and on YouTube as Fix the Money, Fix the World, where he talks all about Bitcoin and spending Bitcoin around the world. He's originally from Australia, and he's been recently spending time between Argentina and El Salvador. So, Luke, welcome to the podcast.
Vance, thank you so much for having me, brother. I'm a long time listener. I think I've put away more than 50 to 60 of your episodes and I'm working my way through them. So it's an honor to finally appear on the podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, to get your own, what's it called, solo episode, having already appeared on the Argentina Roundtable episode, which is live, by the way, at the time of this recording. So you've already made an appearance, and now you've earned a spot and get your own solo episode.
I'm pumped to be here, brother. I hope I don't bore the listeners too much with my really dodgy Australian accent and some dodgy stories from Latin America.
You were born in Australia, right?
Yep.
Okay. Bring me through a little bit of the story because I really don't know it. Kind of like the 60-second version of how you maybe escaped Australia and got into Bitcoin.
Yeah, so always wanted to travel overseas. Found myself being a 23-year-old Australian having never left the country when 2020 happened. 2020 happened. Most people will be familiar that Australia was pretty authoritarian and tyrannical with many of the lockdown measures that they implemented. And me, with my medical status, I was not allowed to leave the country until 2022 when the international borders were opened up. So those who, let's say, took the poison, they were able to leave and go on a holiday, but I couldn't unless I had an online job or an employer that wrote me a letter saying that they required me outside of the border. So I finally escaped in 2022 when my good friend Mark Moss wrote me a letter to say that I was required in Mexico for work. And since leaving Australia in 2022, I've been just stacking as many online revenue streams as possible because I really do think that the future of work is going to be online, and the more revenue streams you got online, the better. So that's my short and sweet little 60-second story.
And remind me, who's Mark Moss?
So he's a big YouTuber. He's nearly got 500,000 subscribers over on YouTube, and he's very big in kind of the macroeconomic and Bitcoin space.
Yeah, that name rings a bell. I think you mentioned him to me recently, but I'm not a Mark Moss expert. What's his kind of background like? He must have been like running with some of the earlier like guys. I don't know, like who? What's his background?
Yeah, so he's got property in Mexico, but essentially he is I think in 2019 he started a YouTube channel. He's essentially he's blown that up to 450,000 subs, and he's actually built. I think he's built eight-figure companies in his life. So he's built tech companies in the early 2000s when that bubble was going on. He also has built up an enormous 8-figure real estate portfolio during that 2008 crash. So he's essentially rode every big bubble. So he's a pretty clued in guy, not just a YouTube Bitcoin shit talker. He's pretty well versed in multiple disciplines.
And how'd you get hooked up with him?
It was honestly very lucky. I was just writing what I thought were very scratchy articles online about macroeconomics and Bitcoin. And I don't know how, but Mark read one of my articles one day and he messaged me on Twitter. I fell off a chair because at the time I was obviously a fan of Mark, and I didn't think it was the real Mark Moss account messaging me, but he said, "Hey, this is all right. You want to come write for me?" And I was like, hell yeah. I was back in Australia in 2021 and that was my first online job.
Interesting. So how did he kind of structure it?
So essentially, it was just like, $15 an hour, come and write for me, and I ended up writing a lot of the scripts for his YouTube videos. So I'd do all the research, find all the images, graphs, charts, and in the 18 months I was working with him, he essentially just hand trained me how to write emails, Twitter threads, LinkedIn posts, pretty much just how to go viral. So that was very useful for me and many of the businesses I am now actually operating. I'm essentially just taking the lessons that Mark taught me and putting my own spin on them and just trying to get that knowledge out there in the world.
Mm. So you were almost like his social media coordinator.
Exactly.
I feel like I need one of those myself.
I'm sure I can help you out in one way, shape, or form.
No, well, it wouldn't be you. You're too expensive now. I need
I wish.
Where does Mark live in Mexico, by the way?
So he's actually, I'm pretty sure he's born and raised in San Clemente, Southern California. He only buys investment properties in Mexico and I think in Baja.
Okay, and what does he do? He has like an Airbnb portfolio?
I believe so. I think he's got less properties these days, but I know he has at least a couple in Mexico. And every year he does the big dirt bike race that goes from Southern California to Mexico. So he does spend a lot of time there.
Oh yeah, yeah. What do they call that? The Baja.
I can't. It's got a TV show and everything,
Baja
and
Road Race.
something like that. Yeah.
You know the Dakar one in Africa? It's
I
kind of like
don't.
that, right? But I'm googling this Baja Road Race. Anyway, so and then how did you? So you were already into Bitcoin before you started working with Mark, and then working with Mark. By the way, side note: working with a mentor, great way to accelerate your path, right? In terms of learning a skill set. So Mark was kind of your first big mentor, it seems like, or most recent mentor. And that kind of gave you the blueprint to build up your own Twitter and your own YouTube. And on Twitter, at the time of this recording, you got 22,000 followers. You were actually bigger than me for a long time, I think. And then on YouTube, you got over 1,000. So you're monetized. You're getting there.
Slow and steady. I've been a little bit distracted growing another YouTube channel for a Bitcoin account last year. So I grew that thing from 0 to 4K in a year. But
Nice.
so the personal channel got a little bit neglected, so to say.
No, I mean, no shade. Mine's like 1,600 or something at the time of this recording. So we're literally like quite similar, actually, both on Twitter and on YouTube. Random question though: do you think when it comes to Bitcoin, it's very different, or I wouldn't say it's like easier in some ways, harder in some ways to build an audience because I feel like there's just a lot more bots with
Mm.
crypto. And so I feel like a lot of these crypto pages I see have like huge follower accounts, and I look at them and I'm like, this has to be half bots.
Mm. Yeah, so I think in crypto, so I always like to make a massive distinction between Bitcoin and crypto. If I were to make content in the crypto space, it would be so easy to grow a following super quickly. So, like for example, just because we're talking about it, I don't like to talk about my own numbers, but I grew that Bitcoin only channel from 0 to 4K in a year. If it was talking about crypto or trading or number go up, like all of the crypto scams, that I could have easily taken that from 0 to 20K in a year, just to kind of give the audience a little bit of my thoughts about the difference in how easy it is to grow a crypto channel.
Yeah,
Because
tell me crypto versus Bitcoin.
yeah, so the high level is I think Bitcoin is the only cryptocurrency out of the 22,000 that is actually decentralized and can actually hold up against a government attack. Every other altcoin, 22,000 of them, they're all centralized. They all have a founder. They all they can all change their rules whenever they want to. They all create themselves, 80% of all the tokens. They give them to their friends and their insiders, and they use that as a marketing budget. So that's why all of these crypto YouTube channels have massive sponsorships. They have massive budgets. It's all because of these scam tokens giving them free money in the scam token. So yeah, I think there's so many bots to answer your question. There's so many bots in the crypto space. And I think growing an audience in crypto would be super easy because it's just people who just want to get rich. They just want to buy a shit coin that 100x's and all of a sudden they're rich. In Bitcoin,
Mm.
that's very different and it's very difficult because you're trying to educate people on Austrian economics and the geopolitical landscape and how Bitcoin fits into it. It's all very boring, very bland topics. But you know, so that's. I hope that answers your question.
And you know what? I wouldn't mind getting into some of that Austrian economic stuff on the podcast. So we'll put a pin in that. I just wanted to read out the thing about the Baja Road Race just to close the loop on that. So, according to Wikipedia, the Baja 1000 is the annual Mexican off-road motorsport race held in the Baja Peninsula. It is one of the most prestigious off-road races in the world, having attracted people from all over the world. Blah blah blah. Founded in 1967. There's also the Baja 250, 400, and 500, but the 1000s, I guess, the big one. And there's various classes, including trophy trucks, dirt bikes, truggies, side by sides, Baja bugs, and buggies, all competing at the same time on the same course.
There you go. Mark does the dirt bike one, and I
Okay,
believe they even have a TV show, so you'll be able to watch him hooning around there on his dirt bike. It sounds like it's a very difficult course. I think it's like 13, 14 days straight. You're
wow,
camping. It's really rough.
that's epic. It says the course has remained relatively the same over the years, about every other event being either a point to point race from Ensenada to La Paz or a loop race starting and finishing in Ensenada.
That's
It's a
the
long
one.
way. Wow, and he does it on a motorcycle. Good thing there's no rain over there.
Yeah, that'd make it even worse.
That's cool. Do you dirt bike as well?
A little bit back in Australia, but it's a little bit more difficult when you're on the road.
Um, so I'd love to get into some of your like philosophies and influences, and I really like that you do have a good sort of um, historical foundation of things. And I wanted to kick things off by asking, who is Buckminster Fuller?
Okay, so I love this question. So he's a very influential American. We'll call him a technologist. So he's written over 30 books on all sorts of different topics, but I'm probably more interested in his views surrounding technology. And Buckminster Fuller was one of the first people who ever predicted the emergence of an energy money. So he was actually fascinated with many of the same things that Nikola Tesla was fascinated with all the way back in the late 1800s. Tesla was fascinated with this idea that we would be able to create essentially free and abundant electricity for the entire world. And Buckminster Fuller, nearly 70 years later, had this idea of creating this global energy grid. So I'm no Buckminster Fuller expert. All I know about Bucky is he saw how technology could change the world, and in a 1973 interview, he predicted Bitcoin. He said, "We will create like a digital currency that will obsolete gold and dollars, and it will be based upon kilowatt hours." So that is essentially what Bitcoin is. A lot of people call Bitcoin energy money, and that's I think that's a pretty okay analogy describing what Bitcoin is. Because I don't want to get too in the weeds, but you're essentially turning wasted energy or electricity into Bitcoin. That's exactly what a Bitcoin miner does. It's
Hmm.
turning electricity into Bitcoin. So
Hmm.
that's a high level of who Buckminster Fuller is.
So I knew about this guy based on his work on geodesic domes, which is basically like a dome or a sphere made of little triangles.
Yeah.
And in Montreal, Canada, there's a very big geodesic dome called the biosphere, the biosphere, that still exists today. It's been there for, I think, about 60 years, since Expo 67 was when they made it. I could be wrong on that. And it was designed personally by Buckminster Fuller, I think, in 1967. And so I always kind of knew about this guy, and I knew he was like one of those polymaths that did a little bit of everything, futurist.
A polymath is a great way to describe him. The guy wrote 30 books. Like he's pumping out a book every 2 years. That's no easy feat.
Right. And they're not easy books either.
No.
Have you ever picked one up, like even just like a PDF online and like taking a look at it?
I have in the libraries, but I've never made my way all the way through one of his books. They're very dense, written in the 60s.
Uh huh. That's cool. Um, do you think that gold has a place in a Bitcoin world or like in a crypto world? Do you think gold is still relevant, or is that going to be, you know what I mean? Or is gold going to kind of make a comeback, or still be? I'm sure it'll be relevant in some capacity, but where do you think these things kind of fit together?
I'll caveat my response by saying that I was buying gold before I was buying Bitcoin. So again, I understand the importance of gold. It's been the best money for the past 5,000 years. But I think on a Bitcoin standard, it's going to be obsoleted. I think that's a pretty big claim to make. But I think gold today is priced around $2,000 an ounce, knocking on the door of making a new all-time high. And I would argue that, 90% of gold's value comes from its monetary premium. So people like Peter Schiff say, gold's always going to have value because it's in teeth, it's in electronics, it has use. And I think that's true. Like gold will still be worth $500 an ounce in 20 years time. But I think it's going to lose its monetary premium very rapidly, the same way that silver's lost its monetary premium over the past 100 years. So a lot of people forget that silver used to actually be the medium of exchange that we used to use for transactions back in the 1700s and 1800s. Gold was very valuable. Most people used to use gold as a store of value, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to go to the shop and buy a loaf of bread with gold because it's worth so much. So people used to use silver as that medium of exchange for smaller transactions. But silver got completely demonetized by fiat money, paper money, when that kind of really started to gain popularity in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And that's just simply because paper money is better technology than silver. Okay, it's a better medium of exchange than silver. So I think the same thing is probably going to happen to gold. Bitcoin is objectively the better technology at storing value than gold is. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's finite in its supply. Gold is not. Gold supply is always growing. Gold is not divisible. Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million, units and 8 decimal places. Gold is impossible to transfer around the world. I can send Bitcoin to somebody in Africa in literally 5 seconds via the Lightning Network free of charge. So I just think we could go down the list, but I think Bitcoin is superior money than gold in every way, shape, or form, objectively. And again, I'm a gold bug, love gold. I love the ideals that it stands upon. Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, he obviously learned a lot from gold and the fact that it is sound money. But I think moving into the digital realm, it's just not going to make sense that gold keeps much of its monetary premium. Like Bitcoin is digital money for the digital realm.
Mm. Hey guys, quick break from the podcast to tell you about job stacking. If you're a remote or hybrid worker looking to maximize your earning potential, then Rolf Haltza, author of Job Stacking, guarantees you'll be able to double your income by implementing his paycheck multiplication layering method. This is the exact system Rolf has used to take his own income and those of many others beyond $20K a month. With this method, Rolf contractually guarantees that you'll be able to double your income in 45 days. So, if you're interested in unleashing your earning potential and doubling your income, then click the link in the description and book a call with Rolf right now. Have you ever heard of the Manila Acapulco shipping route?
It rings a bell, but no, not well versed on it.
So Acapulco used to be the biggest port on I guess, the entire west coast of the Americas, and there was a shipping route between Acapulco, Mexico, and Manila, Philippines. And this shipping route ran for hundreds of years. You can Google something called the Manila Galleon, and it was one of the main things that they were shipping or transporting was silver from Mexico, from the mines of Mexico to China, because China was using a silver standard for their currency for a long time.
That's fascinating, and it ties into a little bit of what I know about. I always talk about the fact that China lost like 80% of its money and its value in the late 1800s and the early 1900s because they didn't want to go on to a gold standard with the rest of the world. They refused. They said, no, we're staying with silver. And this is probably why they wanted to stay with silver, because they were probably getting such a great deal from this shipping route from Mexico to the Philippines. But I didn't even know that. And I commonly talk about the fact that, China was on a silver standard and they suffered the consequences of storing their value in an inferior money, silver, at the time of the world using a gold standard. But that's fascinating. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, yeah, because people probably know the Philippines was a Spanish colony for a long time. And then even to this day in Mexico, there's, I guess, probably there is still a little bit of silver production, and there's all these little mining towns all over Mexico, these little Pueblo Mágicos, where you can go and buy silver, and you can go and buy silver jewelry, and some people go and get married in these towns and like go buy the wedding ring and stuff like that, like on the spot, and the guys still know how to like I don't know, like bang it out and create custom jewelry and stuff with silver. So yeah,
It's very cool, and now that you mention it, I actually have a little bit of a memory. I went to I can't pronounce the name of the pyramid. Was it Chichen Itza, something
Chichen
like that?
Itza, yeah,
There you go. You can pronounce it
in the
far better than me.
Yucatan, yeah.
Yeah, I went to that maybe in 2022, and I don't know whether it was real silver or not, but I paid an obscene amount of money for some little silver looking medallions at one of the stores there. I probably got the gringo price, but probably have them somewhere. So that's very cool. Silver's still ingrained in that Mexican culture pretty deeply.
Where are you at right now, by the way?
So back in El Salvador for Christmas, visiting the girlfriend's family.
I love how you say back in El Salvador. It makes it sound like it's the base.
Yeah, yeah. I think since I've moved out of Australia, I've spent the most amount of time in El Salvador, probably 8 months right now.
So you went straight to Mexico and then at some point moved south to El Salvador. Or how did that happen?
So Mexico for a couple of weeks, and then I was in America. I had a base in Southern California for around 9 months, and when I was working with Mark, I used to travel around to the different conferences and speaking events that he was speaking at. So I got the chance to see 12 different states in America,
Oh, cool.
um, and then since then. Kind of back to El Salvador, Mexico, back to El Salvador, Mexico, back to El Salvador, and then yeah.
How did the first trip to El Salvador come about? Was that with Mark or solo?
So that was solo 2022.
How'd that go down? You said, Mark, I love what you're doing, but I got to go to El Salvador, or what
Yeah.
happened?
Essentially, yeah. So I had a really cool setup in Southern California with him. Like he had like a dedicated YouTube studio that he was renting, and I used to go work with him every day in the little
Uh huh.
studio. We'd have the cameraman, and he would film. I'd write, and we'd have some mental sparring or some mental debates. Always talking about Bitcoin all day. So it was a great setup, but I couldn't get a visa there. It's very difficult to get a visa in America.
Right.
So I think I stayed for my full 90 days on a tourist visa in the US. Went to Peru for 3 weeks to reset my visa. Tried to get back into America. I nearly got fucking detained. They took me into the back room of immigration. They said, "Give us your phone, give us your laptop. No phone calls, no internet connection. You have to wait here until you're being questioned." And they kind of said, "Hey, look, you stayed in America for your full 90 days. You only left for 3 weeks, and you're trying to come back. You trying to live in America illegally, son?" I was like, no, of course not. I'm a tourist. So yeah, essentially, I essentially got given the boot from America's strict immigration
No way.
policies.
They wouldn't let you in.
No, so I did get back in, but I wasn't allowed to do it again. And I couldn't get a long term
Okay,
visa.
so post Peru, post the detainment, they let you in
Yeah,
eventually.
They did,
Okay,
yeah, they
but
let me
you're
in.
like, yeah, I'm not overstaying.
Yeah, yeah. It's very difficult too because they said, show us the fact that you have money. We want to be sure that you have money and you're not trying to earn money in America. And I said, sorry, mate, all my money's in Bitcoin. I don't hold fake dollars or fake money. And it made the negotiation tactic a little bit more difficult on my end because they wanted to say bank accounts or they wanted to know how much Bitcoin I owned. And I told them to take a hike, Mike. I'm not telling you how much fucking Bitcoin I got. That's the first rule of Bitcoin. So yeah, it made it very difficult, but eventually they let me in.
Hmm, interesting. And so to this day, like, are you like 95% of your net worth in Bitcoin or what?
99. Why would I keep
99?
5% in fiat? Yeah, yeah, 100%.
And how does that work logistically?
Depending on the country you're in, it could be sometimes slightly difficult, but typically just I'll go to a local Bitcoin meetup, sell some Bitcoin for some fiat, or just go to a local Bitcoin ATM, get some local fiat. In Argentina, it was super easy because I could just like there's cash dealers everywhere in Argentina, so I could just swap Bitcoin for pesos at the blue dollar rate. In El Salvador, it's I've been here for 2 weeks and I haven't used fiat so far. Just been using Bitcoin everywhere I go. There's a
Even for like buying fruit?
yeah, yeah, Uber drivers. I have an Uber driver who's a Bitcoiner, so he drives me around everywhere. Him and his friends, and they only pay in Bitcoin. And every major supermarket here accepts Bitcoin, which is cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like we're a bit out of order because I wanted to just get more of that story, how you got from Mexico to El Salvador, and then maybe we can come back to some of the logistics of living on Bitcoin because I am quite interested in what that kind of looks like, especially in Latin America. So, how did you get to El Salvador? So you have a girlfriend now that's Salvadoreña, but I imagine you met her in El Salvador. So maybe that first trip down, you just wanted to go check out the country and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So met her mid 2022. Was originally planning on I think only being there for a month and then going to catch up with some friends in Mexico, but met the girlfriend and ended up staying for 7 months. It's a really cool thing about El Salvador as well is how quickly they can get things done. Because at the time they only had a 3 month tourist visa, and I was
Hmm.
thinking, it's going to be a pain in the ass trying to extend visas, but I was pleasantly surprised. Like you just go in they were asking me like, what's your reason for extending your visa? And at the time, like I couldn't speak Spanish, so I just said, uh, "Yo tengo amigos aquí. Me gusta el playa. Me gusta Bitcoin." And that was the reason I wrote on like the official tourist extension form, and they accepted it. So they're very easygoing in El Salvador, and it was done in an hour. I just said for the people who don't speak Spanish, I just said I have friends here. I like Bitcoin. I like beach, and they accepted that for they gave me an extra 3 months in the country. So ended up staying there for 7 months and convinced her finally to leave her job. So she quit her job to come work with me on the road, and then obviously you obviously have the family dynamic of dating Latinas, which is an extra headache because they're very very
Mm.
close with their family, and many families in El Salvador expect you to be married before you start traveling with your boyfriend. So we eventually got her over the line, and I pulled her from her home country, El Salvador. And since then, Pam and I have just been traveling around.
And where have you brought her against her will?
so, so since then, we did 6 months Colombia. We kind of
Oh wow,
bounced
that's a lot.
between. Yeah, we
Dude,
did
you
the
keep
same.
saying everything's like 6 months. I'm like, how the hell all this stuff happened since 2022? You know?
My math doesn't check out. Yeah, so we did 6 months Colombia, bouncing between Medellin and Santa Marta. And then we did 3 months Brazil. So we did Rio, Floripa, and Sao Paulo. And we did, most recently, we did 2 months in Argentina. We were super boring there and we only stayed in the capital city. And now we're back in El Salvador.
Got it. And have you upgraded to any kind of residency visa in El Salvador?
I have not. I've been very lazy. Just been bouncing around on tourist visas for the past couple of years.
Okay, cool. Might be able to help you with that. Side note, if I can plug, so we do help with every different type of El Salvador residency visa, just so the audience is aware. We do residency for every country in Latin America at this point, El Salvador included. So we can help anyone listening to this. Um, but if I can ask, Luke, so tell me a bit about the Latina family dynamic. I don't want to get you in trouble, but I just want to hear about it through the perspective of an Australian with the whole kind of foreign culture thing and maybe some culture shocks that you've experienced.
I've experienced all sorts of culture shocks. When I initially arrived in El Salvador, I was super scared because this was during the time in 2022. El Salvador had a big spate of homicides. Like 90 people got murdered in one weekend in February. So I arrived in El Salvador a little bit after then, and the propaganda.
That was
Like
like the
the
final weekend where after
Mm,
that, Bukele was like, yo, now we're
yeah.
sending the army in. Was that like that final weekend?
Yeah, we're going to
Okay,
fucking
okay.
war with the gangs. And I was
Okay,
sitting there,
okay.
I was watching that from abroad thinking, shit, well, am I going to get caught in some crossfire here in El Salvador? But I thought, hey, I may as well go. So, so culture shock, yes, there's lots of culture shock just in regards to how everything's different. But the family dynamics is a really interesting one because the girlfriend's family is like extra Christian. Like they go to church on the weekends. And that's very different to like Australian culture. Like there is no culture in Australia. People just, sleep around, very promiscuous, very little family values. I'm a fitting example of that. I haven't talked to my mum or dad in like 8 years. Like I moved out of home when I was 16. Couch surfing, things like that. That kind of thing in El Salvador is unheard of. Like typically the families are very close in El Salvador, and so the girlfriend's family is very close. Both of her brothers still live at home, and they're in their mid-20s. That's a little bit more uncommon in Australia. I suppose so. That's very different. That was a culture shock. And I tell you what, it's even more difficult when you don't speak the local language fluently. Like I don't really know a whole bunch of Spanish. I know enough to get around and be a little bit dangerous. But the girlfriend's parents both only speak Spanish, so that's from times it could be a little bit awkward if you're having like a deep and meaningful conversation, and you can't do that fluently. So yeah, there's certainly lots of interesting dynamics as a Westerner that you do see in these Latin American countries. But like for me personally, I prefer like this more traditional kind of values that you do see in Latin America. I'm not a fan of Western values and Western culture. So for me, I take the good with the bad. Yes, it can be difficult sometimes to pry my girlfriend out of the hands of her parents, but
That's how it should
they're
be. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
okay. And do you have them on WhatsApp? Like, do you have the parents or the brothers on WhatsApp?
Yeah, we're pretty. We do Christmas together and all of that. We're pretty close.
Yeah. How did Christmas go?
Christmas is great. It's funny enough. So they do Christmas in El Salvador on the 24th.
Mhm.
So we did Christmas on 24th, and on the 25th, I don't know how I did it, but I roped them into coming to a Bitcoin meetup at the Bitcoin embassy here in El Salvador. So there's a little meetup coming on, and originally the girlfriend's parents were just going to drop me and Pam off at the Bitcoin embassy. I said, no, why don't you come in? Come in and get some food and say hello. And so yeah, I'm always spreading my Bitcoin propaganda to everyone, especially the parents-in-law. So brought them in, introduced them to some of the local Bitcoiners there, and it was great fun.
Okay, that was probably good for the parents to kind of see that you're, involved in the community and that you have, some purpose and that kind of thing.
Yeah, especially kind of being around Bitcoiners, because I think most people's perception of Bitcoiners is like a crypto perception. Oh, a Bitcoiner just wants to get rich. They're exploiting capitalism by moving around in these Latin American countries, bringing their wealth that they didn't earn. They just earned it through speculation. And like that's kind of not the case at all with Bitcoiners. Very different to the crypto crowd. So I think
Mm,
it was good for them to meet a lot of these Bitcoiners who are like very grounded in reality, and they're very like conscious about what they're doing here in El Salvador. Like many of the Bitcoiners here, like they are on a mission. They really want to improve this country. Like El Salvador is one of the countries that has suffered the most over the past 20 years.
mhm.
Like the people, like for example, my girlfriend's family, they've had like 6 telephones stolen from them from the local gangs over the years. So the brother's been had 2 phones flogged, the girlfriend one, the other brother two, the dad one. So like innocent, nice people just have been absolutely beaten down for years. So I think it's it's very poetic that they are embracing freedom money, and they're cleaning up the gangs, they're cleaning up the crime, and a lot of the Bitcoiners who are living here, they want to genuinely see the people of El Salvador actually get a foot up, and they want to actually see their standard of living improve. So it was nice for the girlfriend's parents to actually see some more Bitcoiners who could speak Spanish more fluently and kind of say, hey, look, we fucking love your country. We want to improve it. How can we
Right.
help?
Right. Because the parents probably don't interact with foreigners on a regular basis other than yourself. So it's probably interesting for the parents to see, like, oh, there's other foreigners and they're kind of thriving.
Yeah, exactly. It was very nice, and I don't give the most professional impression. I'm walking around with a fucking crazy haircut, fucking socks and thongs, singlets everywhere. So they probably
Do you
think
gel your hair with spikes or does it just do that?
it's fucking crazy, man. I got hair wax in it. It's an
Okay.
absolute mess.
Okay. So you use some kind of wax or something. Because
Yeah.
it's like part of your look, I think, on YouTube and stuff is like you got, so maybe your super fans are happy I'm asking you like what's actually going on with the hair. What's your routine? What's the hair routine?
It's fucking it's too long. That's what it is. It's fucking hair wax in, throw it around. I look like a puffball when I don't have hair wax in my defense. It just looks strange. So I've kind of resorted to it from a young age, and I've stuck with it.
Hey guys, quick break from the episode to tell you about BitRefill. BitRefill allows you to shop online and in person without banks, converting your crypto directly into merchant balance. We're talking gift cards to Nike, Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Hotels.com, and many more, all paid for with crypto. BitRefill offers more than 10,000 gift card options in 180 countries all across Latin America, including Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador, and many more. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. Okay, cool. What's your wax of choice?
Well, it's funny. It changes every country you go to here in Latin America. Because I was in El Salvador 2022 trying to get my wax of choice, and it would have cost me about $40 a tub when you account for the shipping costs. So I think, fuck this. I go to one. I always go to a tub of wax that doesn't make me look like a slick back Mexican. So they all use that gel, and it's all like really shiny and shit. So I'll use one that's not like that
The
because they
anti-shine one. Okay.
anti-shine.
Okay. Gotcha. And back to the family thing, because I think this is huge, and we don't hear about this enough. It's very tough to crystallize this in tweets, for example. But I feel like in a podcast format, it's a little bit easier to just explain how much closer the families are and what your experience has been with that. Maybe like for example, I'm just queuing you up, but maybe your girlfriend's on the phone like 2 hours a day with her family and you're like, how are you still on the phone, like what is going on? I don't, things like that.
You absolutely nailed it. It's funny, we've never talked about that for the listeners, but like whenever we're traveling, it's literally 2 hours a night that she'd be on the
And it
phone with
kind
the
of works out
parents.
because you get to work and do your Bitcoin thing and you're on, I don't know, whatever, coinmarketcap.com or something, and she's just like on the phone like doing the cheese may.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation. You get a little bit of I hope she doesn't listen to this part of the podcast, but I get a little bit of a break. She gets to talk to the family. She's rejuvenized, re-energized. She loves talking to the family. It's a win-win.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's like when I use my phone, it's because I'm like making money. I'm like talking to
Mm.
like clients, potential clients, And with her, she's like on the phone just as much, but it's just with like six family members type of thing. It's like,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
It's very different, and like I very rarely just talk to friends or family from Australia because I'm the same as you. Like I won't use my phone unless it's somewhat business related. I don't use fucking Facebook or Instagram or
Right.
Snapchat, any of that trash. Um, yeah, so it's just one of the differences with this, tight knit family and this kind of traditional culture that you do see in Latin America.
Have you gone to church with them?
No, no, I haven't.
Ah, well, why?
I know, I know. It's the mum and dad do it. The kids don't even do it that much anymore.
Okay. Do it. You should do it. I think it's
Yeah.
cool to at least have you seen the inside of the churches?
Not one in El Salvador, but I went to a Catholic school back in Australia, so we used
Uh-huh.
to have to do it every Sunday.
You gotta check it out. At least like because one thing about Catholic churches is they leave the doors open like basically every single day
Mm.
until nightfall. And so you can always just pop your head in and they're usually some of the most architecturally
Mm.
valuable buildings in a particular city, right? Where they were built hundreds of years ago. There's tons of gold, ornate stuff, and old paintings. So it's fun, even if you don't go during a mass, just to pop your head into the church and kind of get the vibe for things. And I think it provides some cultural context as well.
Oh, I definitely co-sign that. I think your churches, architecturally, they're the most beautiful buildings in any city you'll go to. We went to, I don't remember the name of the cathedral in Sao Paulo, but it's one of the most popular
Right
tourist
downtown.
attractions. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're
yeah.
talking about. With
It's
the
like
steps out front. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, big steps. It's the most gorgeous building. The girlfriend and I probably spent 30 minutes inside, just, jaws on the ground, just absolutely in shock at how beautiful this thing is. So I definitely do co sign that, even though I haven't been to one here in El Salvador. We do check out the other ones in some of the other countries we've been to, though.
So in El Salvador, where are you? Are you in the beach? Are you in the mountains?
I kind of bounce around. So I'll be in El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach for a bit. Um, it depends upon, well, this podcast, it'll come out in the future. So I can be a little bit more loose with where I am. I'm in the city right now. But
In
El
San
Salvador's,
Salvador.
yeah, San Salvador. Very
Okay.
small country. So there's actually, like, you can drive 2 hours either side and get to the coast. So it's really cool. Lots of things to do.
Got it. And how does accommodation work? Because I haven't been yet and I want to, kind of think about the logistics. Are you doing Airbnbs or like when you're at the coast, like where do you stay?
Yeah, so I'm normally doing Airbnbs when I'm in the city. Uh, on the When I go down to El Zonte, there's lots of really cool like beachfront like little hotels that all accept Bitcoin. Like their Bitcoin is there, so they'll be my choice when I go stay on the beach in El
Hotels.
Zonte. Yeah,
So, okay, okay. So on the beach, you go to hotels. When you're in the city, Airbnbs.
yeah.
Okay, cool. And have you been to the other cities like Santa Ana and or San Miguel or I kind of forget the names now, but like all the kind of like tier B, tier C cities. Have you checked some of those out?
Yeah, I've done Santa Ana. It's a really cool little city. It actually reminds me of a slightly underdeveloped Arequipa in Peru. It's like
Mm,
really like very similar architecture, and obviously the more remote it is, the more interesting the culture gets. Like some of those places in Peru that I was going, they would look at me like I was an alien with three heads. I'm white. I'm
when
an
you were in
average.
Santa Ana?
Well, Santa Ana and some of the places in Peru as well. They both don't get many
Huh.
tourists. So they'd just be gawking at this weird looking thing that I am. I look very different to the locals. So yeah, Santa Ana's really nice. I'm planning on going out to Berlin because there's a little
I was
thriving.
gonna ask, dude. I was gonna ask if you've been to Berlin.
It is certainly on the list of things to do. I'm making another documentary about my time here in El Salvador, like a follow up to the one I made last year. And right now, there's like a thriving Bitcoin community out in Berlin. So I'm gonna have to go and check that out as well.
We have a podcast episode. It's not out at the time of this recording, but it'll probably come out before yours with Nikki and James.
Dude, great find. They are some of my favorite Bitcoiners.
They're cool, right? So there's Nikki and James are in Berlin, and also the what's his name, Guillaume, the French dude.
Yeah.
Is that his name?
You pronounce it better than I could.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
Nick.
Guillaume.
Yeah, Nicky and James, they're when I got in El Salvador, they were one of the first people who just reached out and wanted to help me with everything I needed. They're very, very cool. I recommend anyone who's interested in El Salvador or Bitcoin, head on over to their YouTube channel and watch some of the videos of them on the ground in El Salvador, or just wait until the podcast with Nicky and James comes out in the
Yes.
future with you here on My Latin Life.
Yeah, I guess they're on YouTube and also on Twitter, and you guys can just search Nikki James El Salvador, and it should come right up. And they're one of the biggest promoters, I think. Like they kind of even know like Stacy and Max Kaiser and stuff.
Yeah, they're really cool, and they're always trying to do more to help the community. I think that's one of the reasons they left, El Zonte or La Libertad where they were, and they wanted to go out to Berlin and help kind of accelerate and push this Bitcoin adoption everywhere in the country. Like it's not just, I know like some people are cautious of you know El Salvador just becoming a Bitcoin country where the rich kind of just hang out in one very small pocket of the country. And, that's
Hmm.
kind of not what's happening. Like a lot of the Bitcoiners there are trying to push adoption everywhere in the country, which is really
Hmm.
nice to see.
That's cool. How have you seen things change over the past 2 years? Because the word's obviously out now.
Hmm. Yeah, so I've forgotten how friendly people are in El Salvador. So I obviously stayed for 7 months in 2022. I did enjoy my time, and that's partially because the people there are so friendly. And I've been away from El Salvador for 9 months. I did Brazil, Colombia, Argentina. I come back to El Salvador this week, and I was like, oh shit! Like these people are so friendly here. I'd kind of forgotten. I think they're the most friendly people in Latin America. They're so
Really?
happy, so cheerful. Oh yeah, yeah, very happy, very cheerful. And obviously, I'm a gringo who doesn't speak that good of Spanish, and they're still very welcoming and everything with me. And what's improved, I think people are becoming more accustomed with gringos now. So I still get the odd, look here or then. But when I was here in 2022, the Bitcoin law had only just passed, and there wasn't a whole lot of gringos or tourists here. But from all of the locals I've talked to here, apparently they are seeing more and more gringos and tourists here. So the people are still very welcoming, still very friendly. Like even in the past year, there's been so much change. Like for example, when I first got to El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach, I essentially flew from Southern California to El Zonte, El Salvador. So one of the richest countries in the world to one of the poorest parts in the world. And before I got to El Zonte, El Salvador, when I say I did Mexico, I didn't really do Mexico. I faked it. I only went to Tulum and like Playa del Carmen, like very nice, touristy locations. So I got a hell of a culture shock when I landed in El Zonte because there's no roads, there's no lights at night. So after 6 p.m., it's pitch black. There's
Really?
no Ubers. Oh, yeah. This was El Zonte last year, 2022. But coming back this year, they've already like decked out the whole Bitcoin beach with like proper paved roads, and there's
Really?
nights at lights. Yeah. And this is only in like under 12 months. Like even the airport completely transformed. When I first got there in 2022, it was just a stock standard airport, nothing special. But even coming back like this year, they've done a bunch of renovations. They must have spent tens of millions of dollars, getting the airport up and about. Like everywhere in the country is improving, and it's really interesting. And like obviously it's gone from being one of the most dangerous countries in the world in 2021 to one of the safest in the world in 2023. And like the people here that you talk to about it, like they absolutely love it. Like they're saying, look, this country is a completely different country. I can actually let my kids outside at night and go and play on the street. Like that was never thought about 5 years ago. Like that was way too dangerous. So yeah, it's El Salvador is improving in every aspect, and it's amazing to see.
Wow. I didn't realize you were gone for 9 months. I don't know how you convinced the family to let you go
Yeah.
9 months with the with the daughter.
Whoa, funny story, funny story. First time we left, we told them that we were only going to leave for 1 month.
Uh-huh.
And it got to the end of the 1 month, and the girlfriend's like, "Hey, we're kind of enjoying Colombia. We might stay a little bit longer." And yeah, it got to 2 months, and then it was the mum's birthday, and obviously, like birthdays are like big things for them, and so that got a little bit awkward. There was a couple of yeah, awkward conversations on the phone at about the 2 month stage, but we just eventually kept pushing out our stay, and we're like, hey, we've been gone for 3 months now, we're enjoying it, and yeah, so it turned into a 9 month trip until we returned. But they were very good about it. It was funny. 6 months into our trip. The mum and one of her brothers were actually scheduled to go on a trip to Europe. Um, so it was like a big thing for them. They don't travel much, but what the trip to Europe got cancelled last minute. So we were kind of like, hey, why don't you come and stay with us in Colombia? Like, we'll pay for the Airbnb and all of that. You've taken 2 weeks off work for this trip to Europe. Why don't you come to Colombia and come and hang out with us? So this was. So yeah, the mom and one of her brothers came and stayed with us for
Oh,
a couple of
cool.
weeks in Colombia, and that certainly helped my chances at taking her away again next time on a
Yeah.
on a on a
Why
long
why did you
travel.
have to do so much time in Colombia? I don't even get it. Like, what was because it's like basically the same thing. Like, it's the same climate. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you could have just been in El Salvador.
yeah, Colombia is 50% cheaper than El Salvador.
Mm.
And I'm best friends with a kid named Joshua Lassard, 21 years old, and he's going to be a billionaire. So I'd pencil his name if you're listening in. The kid's an absolute freak. But he works full time for George Gammon. He's another YouTuber who, like Mark, has about a 500,000
George
followers.
Gambit does.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
rings a bell, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm best friends with Josh, and we got hooked up living in one of George's apartments in Medellin, and like obviously George and Josh are super close friends, so we got a super sweet deal on it. We got a like penthouse apartment for really cheap, 3 bedroom apartment. So we kind of didn't want to leave. Like the food and everything in Colombia is so cheap. We got to hang out with George on the weekends, and at night he'd take us to all of the fanciest restaurants in Medellin. So we got a great deal in Medellin. So we ended up staying for 6 months. We really enjoyed it.
Okay, got it. I knew that there must have been something there.
Hmm. What are your thoughts on Medellin and Colombia in
Uh,
general?
I like Medellin. I think it's cool. I like Colombia.
You
I don't
wouldn't
know. I
spend
don't.
six
I
months
don't.
there?
I don't have like a crazy take that to like drop on the podcast right now. I think it's um, pretty good. I like Mexico more though, to be honest.
Mm,
I think it has more culture. I think it's a little bit safer. Obviously, it's a little bit more expensive, but I think it has more like regional variation uh, and like more different cities and stuff. Like Colombia is sort of limited in terms of the number of cities there are and stuff. So
mm.
I like Mexico, but I mean El Salvador, man. I would really like to spend some time there very soon. I would really like to do multiple months and like get into it.
I would. There's certainly less things to do in El Salvador. Like, obviously, I've talked a lot about the benefits of El Salvador on the podcast. Don't get me wrong; it's still like a developing country. Like the infrastructure in the city is certainly improving. Like some of the malls look no different to some of the malls you see in America. Like super
Hmm.
modernized, very Western. Um, just giving the listener a full breadth of what to expect in El Salvador. Like I spent 6 months there in 2022. For me, it was a bit long. I was like, hey, I'm bored. Let's go. Check out some of the other cool places around the world. But I think you should definitely check it out. It's a cool little country, and check out El Zonte, Bitcoin Beach. They've also got some really cool volcanoes there.
Hmm.
That is certainly worth a look. We're going to go and do the
There's
one
even
in.
some Mayan ruins, right, near San Salvador. Have you checked those out?
We haven't done those yet.
Hit that
Um,
up, bro. You probably just Uber there, I think.
yeah, we're going to have
Yeah,
to
there's some
check it
cool
out.
Mayan ruins because it's like the furthest south of the Mayan civilization. So there
Mm.
still are a bunch of pyramids and stuff dotted a little bit throughout El Salvador.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to put that on the bucket list. But yeah, I think you'll definitely enjoy your time if you end up coming down here to El Salvador.
Yeah, it's been on the to do list for a while. Um, Amazing. And what would be the downsides of El Salvador? Like other than getting bored,
Yeah,
what are
yes.
the downsides?
So getting bored is certainly a big one. It's more expensive, for example. I just got I got raped with a $4 coffee today at Starbucks. I like obviously living in Argentina where everything's half price in Argentina. I'm assuming that things would be
Wait,
probably
they have
third.
Starbucks in El Salvador?
Oh yeah, they
Yeah.
accept Bitcoin at Starbucks.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah,
But it's a coffee country, so you can obviously get cheap coffee by the kilo and stuff.
yeah, yeah. So it's more expensive in El Salvador. What are the downsides? Boring. Nothing
I don't
else.
think there's no way it's boring. I mean, anyway, but keep going.
Yeah, less to see. Like for example, like we were just in the capital city of Argentina, and you every corner you go around, there's like this new gorgeous building. Like the architecture there is so interesting. It's fascinating. Like just walking places in Argentina was really cool. I think maybe San Salvador's less walkable and certainly less attractive when you're walking around. So there's that. But aside from that, like they're the major downsides, I suppose. Some people think. Obviously, the country has a like a. Let me make sure I say this carefully and not get myself in trouble. They have martial law, so it's very common to see the military walking around the streets with guns. Obviously,
In
like
El Salvador.
oh yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so very common to see like the military walking around with big machine guns.
Huh?
So like obviously I'm a Bitcoiner. I prefer there be no governments anywhere. I'm libertarian. Obviously El Salvador is a little bit of a unique example, but there'll be some libertarians who kind of shit on El Salvador a bit, and they're like, yes, they cleaned up the country, but they're living under martial law. So that's another caveat, and maybe some people might perceive that as being a downside. Um, yeah, that's all I can think of. How about you?
Honestly, from my perspective, if I could go for walks at night and wear AirPods blissfully, that would be huge. If I could walk around feeling invincible in Latin America the same way I kind of do in Canada or the States, even though it's probably misplaced in the States, but
Mm,
I, I, uh, I think that would be awesome. So I think that's one cool benefit of El Salvador is you can just walk around and feel invincible, and you can't really do that in a lot of places in Latin America, unfortunately. Not that Latin America is any more unsafe than the United States, for example, but I think that's a huge benefit of El Salvador. So I think that's cool. And then when you got the beach, you got volcanoes. You could buy like a Toyota Hilux truck or something for less than a Bitcoin, and
mm.
just be like ripping around the country, doing all these crazy waterfalls and hikes and visiting the Mayan ruins and this and that. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Definitely a cool country, and I don't know if I've said it, but I'm going to double down on it if I have said it already. Easily the safest country I've been to by a long shot. You really do feel invincible. The first couple of times I was walking around at night in 2022, I felt really weird because at night there was nobody on the streets when it's dark. Absolutely nobody. This was just after like the big spate of violence, but now there's more people doing things at night. The culture's adjusting to that, and
Yeah.
I think you'd be absolutely fine in the country.
Yeah, yeah. It probably took time for people to adjust their patterns a bit, and I guess
Mm,
you kind of skip that when you're out of the country, so it must have felt very night and day. Dude, like that's crazy because you're in the country basically during the historic shift. You dip for 9 months, go to Brazil, blah blah blah. When you come back, There's roads, there's lights, there's people in the streets after dark. It's like night and day.
It's a completely different country. It's like a lot of people are saying El Salvador's going to become the Singapore of Latin America in 20 or 30 years. And like I can certainly see that. Like if you look at the trajectory of the country in just only 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
like if Bukele gets reelected as president, I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty bullish on what the country can achieve.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Job Stacking. Introducing Rolf Haltza's Paycheck Multiplication Layering Method, a revolutionary approach that redefines the traditional career path. This is Rolf's new Done With You program where he'll work with you to implement job stacking for yourself. With this method, Rolf contractually guarantees that you'll be able to double your income in 45 days. So, are you ready to step out of the shadows of job insecurity and step into a world of career abundance? Then just click the link in the description of this episode, book a call with Rolf, and start walking the path of unleashing your earning potential with job stacking. Yeah. And what's interesting about that prediction is that we recently saw Panama have issues with protests and with that mine, right?
Mm,
And the fact that they canceled that mining contract in Panama, according to a lot of observers, kind of demonstrates that Panama is like less capitalistic. And like, I'm not saying that right, but that Panama, you know what I mean? That
mm,
contracts are not 100% enforced, or capitalism can kind of, I don't know, it's like a little bit creaky, you could
mm,
say. Whereas in El Salvador, it's really on the up and up and kind of pro capitalism. So it'd be kind of cool in the future if El Salvador really developed their financial markets and got to and really made it a goal of theirs to displace Panama as sort of the financial hub of Central America and really of Latin America. And I could see it happen because
mm.
it's Uruguay and it's Panama. Uruguay is great right now and it does really well. And we, by the way, we help people set up remote bank accounts in El Salvador. You guys can message us. We can get you a bank account in sorry in well, we can in El Salvador, but I meant in Uruguay or in Panama. We can get you bank accounts in Uruguay and Panama, and they're both great. But I feel like Uruguay might get a little bit infected by the woke stuff, and then
Mm.
Panama has always been like had this weird relationship with capitalism. They've always had a weird relationship with capitalism, and so I think El Salvador could very easily take the throne if they just put their mind to it.
Let me again backtrack just slightly. I just thought of another downside of El Salvador. So I obviously escaped Australia because of the COVID hysteria and the madness. And I just hate seeing people with masks around. There's certainly more mask wearing in El Salvador than any other country. Again, it's not mandated. The government doesn't care. The government is very anti woke, and they were one of the first governments to actually reverse their 2020 stance. Like in
Mm-hmm.
2021, they came out and they produced like an official government video that went on all the social media sites, and they were kind of saying, "Look, the best thing you can do for your health is actually, surprise, surprise, eat good food, get sunlight, exercise, and take ivermectin." A drug that was banned in Australia. I hope that doesn't get your channel, this video deleted on YouTube. If it does,
It
maybe just
might.
cut,
It
cut this
might.
section out.
Wait. Cut.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, so again, that's maybe personally, I don't like seeing people in masks, and maybe there's 2% of the population still wearing masks in El Salvador, so it's more prevalent than the rest of Latin America. So I see that as a downside. But going back to El Salvador displacing Panama, what we're actually talking about, I 100% see that in the cards for El Salvador. Like even, for example, their most recent $1 million freedom visa initiative
Mm-hmm.
that they pushed through. I'm sure we can get into an interesting discussion about whether that's too expensive or too cheap. There's been lots of chatter about that online. But I heard on a recent podcast with Max and Stacy that they're about to be handing out those passports next month already. So it came out literally 2 weeks ago, this $1 million freedom passport. And it looks as
Yeah,
if the people are already getting their passports like 6 weeks later.
I
So
believe it. I believe it.
so yeah, I think this kind of and for example, El Salvador also so Bukele completely scrapped like most taxes for any technology companies. So it
Yep,
wasn't just like Bitcoin companies. He was like, hey, all these tech companies, we want them coming to El Salvador. So I don't know if he completely scrapped
exactly.
the taxes to zero or he dropped them to very low, but like he's opening up the country for the capitalists to come in and open business. So I like if you just look at how radically things have changed in 2 years. Like again, the human mind cannot think in exponentials. We our mind is trained to think linearly. But I think like the change that El Salvador can bring in 5 years, I think it could be absolutely enormous.
It's true. I mean, if they've done this much in basically 18 months, I mean, crazy.
They
And
even you go.
yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, I was looking at it. El Salvador's population is 6.3 million.
Yep.
Panama is, off the top of my head, is around 4.2, maybe 4.5 max. So there's actually 2 million more people in El Salvador, for which, all else being equal, if GDP per capita was equal, that would make El Salvador 50% bigger. Obviously, El Salvador doesn't have the canal, but um, yeah, I mean, manpower.
El Salvador also has a benefit that those stats don't show. I believe there's actually more Salvadorians living outside of the country than inside the country. So I'm not sure whether that statistic takes into
Hmm.
the fact all of the people living outside. So again, massive caveat. I'm just talking shit here on the podcast, so this could be wrong. But does that mean there's also 6 or 7 million Salvadorians living in Mexico or America? Because I was looking at the international migration figures recently for El Salvador, and for years it's been net negative. So Salvadorians have been fleeing their country because they're scared of the gangs and their violence, and there's no economic opportunity, so they're going elsewhere. But recently, that's beginning to kind of turn around, and it looks as if it's going to actually flip next year, where you're going to actually see Salvadorians coming back to the country as opposed to leaving it.
Hmm.
And this would be the first time this has happened in 20 years. So El Salvador could actually have like 12 million Salvadorians, or
Something
um,
like that, yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that's right, but
Yeah, and it's a very fast path to citizenship. 3 years, I believe, 3 years of residency to citizenship. They do. I think they encourage birth tourism as well. I'm not sure if you get permanent residency right off the bat. I would suspect that yes, if you had a baby in El Salvador as a foreigner, you would get instant PR. Um, yeah, I mean, it'd be a really really cool passport to have.
I think I'm going to start that this year. The only issue I've got is I'm really got my heart set on getting the Argentinian passport. You have to stay in Argentina for more than 6 months a year. So,
Hmm.
depending upon the requirements with El Salvador, I'm not sure how many months a year you have to stay there when you're on that temporary
In El
residency.
Salvador, I would
Yeah.
say, yeah, six months a year as well.
Yeah, so that'll pose a difficulty. But if you're someone looking for just any sort of passport, like I am, El Salvador is like a no brainer. It's not the best passport, obviously for travel. It's one of the worst. But if you have another passport in your toolkit, that's what you want. Especially if you're sitting there with an American or a Canadian or an Australian passport like myself, you need a plan B because citizenship based taxation, it's coming. A lot of these Western countries probably going to start rolling that out.
Yep. You think
So,
so?
oh yeah, yeah. Australia's already hinted at it in
Yep.
2023. They started talking about it.
Didn't they implement something though? It was like they made it harder to leave, something like that.
I think so. And I actually had a chat with an accountant last week, and I asked him about this specifically, and he said, "Ah, nah, I haven't heard anything major. I can easily fill out an exit tax form for you, and you can that you don't have any tax obligations to Australia. So if you're an Australian, I think you might have a narrow but shrinking window of opportunity there to sort out your taxes.
Hmm.
Before something more serious gets spoken about in the country and actually implemented."
It's such a no-brainer to me, to any Canadian, Australian, European listening to this, to just leave your high tax, angry, authoritarian
Mm.
country, get tax residency somewhere in very favorable Latin America, be it El Salvador. A couple other options that might work would be Costa Rica, Panama, Paraguay, Uruguay, even Ecuador, even Honduras. So to me, Dominican Republic as well. To me, it's a no-brainer that like there's no reason not to. I mean, I think and it's going to be so much more difficult to do so in 5 years.
I agree. I think it is going to get more difficult to do so, and these Western nations are going to start really kind of tightening the noose, so to say, and it's going to be more difficult to leave.
They have to. I mean, I was just
Mm.
looking at the Canada one because we have a lot of Canada clients that we're helping escape Canada. And it's as easy as getting legal residency in another country and spending less than 6 months a year in Canada and reducing your substantial ties to Canada. That's
No
very
brainer.
easy. It's very easy. And it's just not going to look like that in 5 years. I guarantee it. I
Mm.
guarantee it. So, yeah, people should absolutely get on it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And it's easier than you think, sorting out these kind of residency processes. I think when I first left Australia, I was kind of, pulling my hair out a little bit, trying to figure it all out myself. But, that's where, people like yourself come into the equation. I had to just happily pay for somebody who's an actual expert in setting up these residencies and just expediting the
Mhm.
process. Saves you so much hassle, and there's a lot of paperwork involved with it. So, I think if you're a Canadian or Australian, start looking at your options now while you still can.
This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Bit Refill. Bit Refill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. Visit bitrefill.com for more information. So tell me about and we'll start wrapping up, but tell me about the income streams that you've been trying to build. So where's your energy been recently? What are you most excited about in terms of building, online revenue streams?
Yeah, so I'm still have three or four different income streams in the Bitcoin space where I'll manage social medias for different companies, Twitter accounts, emails, etc. But I've been becoming more and more interested in helping other people scale their YouTube channels. So I just think there's so much low hanging fruit that someone with a YouTube channel can kind of pick, so to say, and it's gonna double their views, triple their views very easily. Like the YouTube algorithm's the best one out of all the social media platforms, and that's why I think YouTube's, it's the platform anyone should be focusing on growing.
Hmm.
And once you figure out that algorithm, it's so easy to game. Like YouTube's as simple as YouTube's only looking at two things: is somebody clicking on that person's video, and once they click on it, are they watching that video? So once you really start to understand those two analytics behind those two wants that YouTube has, it's very easy to really start scaling your YouTube channel. So that's kind of where a lot of my focus is. I was lucky enough to work with Mark and, pick the brains of someone like George Gammon, another YouTube guru, for 6 months there in Colombia. I feel like I've learned a lot, so I'm beginning to put that knowledge to use, so to say, and
So let
I've
me
worked.
ask you, maybe I could get some selfish tips about what I should do. So you probably know that we post the podcast on YouTube, right? And I actually started adding not only I started adding AI generated shorts just this past week, and I have them queued up for every single day of the month. And it's kind of funny; they actually get like 100 plus, 200 plus views on the AI generated short, which is jokes. And then I started creating long form videos, like 10-minute plus videos, 20-minute plus videos, where I'm doing tutorials explaining, how I book flights or different aspects of digital nomad stuff. And I'm going to be uploading a lot of those in 2024. Um, so what do you think? Any thoughts on how I can maybe either get more traffic to the videos that I put out, or different strategies?
Yeah, so a big one with YouTube is it's very high. The people on there, are very picky. So everybody on YouTube, one of the biggest things that Mr. Beast always talks about is once you've hooked somebody with your title and thumbnail, the first 5 seconds of that video, you 100% have to confirm that you are going to be talking about what's on your title and thumbnail in those first 5 seconds.
Hmm.
So that's why people.
And that's the way you just go. In today's video, we're going to be talking about why Luke is the man.
Yeah, pretty much. So
Okay.
if the title and thumbnail for today's video, for example, is shit talking with an Australian gringo who's living in Latin America with Luke Mikic, that means in the first 5 seconds you have to reaffirm that what the person clicked on is what they're going to get, and that's what so many channels do wrong. They do an extended introduction, talking about sponsors and ad reads. And again, I used to do this myself on my channel with the Bitcoin educational company I was managing that channel for. So again,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not insulting anyone, but like the first 60 seconds, that has to have like all the information in it. And so what I typically do with clients is I get them to put their ad reads a little bit later on into the video, or just simply the first 30 seconds of the video has to be you like saying, in today's interview, we're going to be talking to Luke, who is an Australian digital nomad who escaped Australia in 2022. He's got 7 income streams, traveled to
Yeah.
12 countries. You need to get all the sound bites at the front of the interview. So that's a big thing. That's like really super low lying fruit somebody can grab. It's probably super
Mm.
valuable. And
So
another one.
I currently on the podcast. Sorry to interrupt. I do the first ad read before the episode starts, because I just figured, that's what the company's probably paying me for. They probably want to make sure that that gets heard. You know what I mean? They never actually bit refill. They never actually like mandated it has to be at the very beginning. And I'm sure I do get some drop off due to that. Um, so yeah, maybe I should rethink like, but I already do splice ads like later into the video. But yeah,
Low lying fruit for YouTube is I would move that to the middle of the video where you already do it, because I know you
so I do
splice
it. I
them.
do it at the intro,
Yeah,
before the intro, where it's like this episode is brought to you by XYZ,
yeah.
and then there's another one around the 20-minute mark, and then another one around the 40-minute mark.
Yeah, so I would move the one from your introduction at to the, like the 15 or the 10-minute mark for YouTube, because I've noticed with all the playing around that I've found with the retention graphs, like I've run so many of these experiments with clients, changing the ad read from the intro to the 5-minute mark. It makes a huge difference because YouTube is so centered on that first 60 seconds. So important, super
Yeah,
super important.
yeah,
So that's super low lying fruit. But again, on a podcast feed, you can get away with that because on a podcast feed, there's no algorithm. So if you can make a change on YouTube by moving that ad read later on into the video, if you see a greater retention from making that change, then YouTube all of a sudden says, oh shit, more people are listening to this episode because there's less of a drop off in retention at the beginning of the
or at
video.
least they try to skip it. And sometimes what happens on YouTube is you try to skip like a minute
Yeah.
forward, and they hit you with another YouTube ad, and you're like, God
Yeah.
damn
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So if you move that ad later, and the result of that being people are watching the video for a longer amount of time, then YouTube says, "Oh shit, Vance did something right with this episode.
Yeah, I
We're going
get
to
it.
push it out to more people."
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it
And it's the
definitely makes sense.
same thing with the thumbnail. Like here's every single day I used to work with Mark. He used to say, "You have to create curiosity. If your thumbnail and title does not create."
Create curiosity. I like that.
Yeah, you need to force somebody to click on your video. It's like there has to be like some element of curiosity or scarcity. So, like for example, a big one that lots of the YouTubers use is, these are the 5 tips that you need to know if you're going to be living in Mexico, or these are the 4 shocking countries you haven't heard about in Latin America. I'm just going off the cuff, trying to reel off like video ideas that someone like yourself could take advantage of. Like, if you thought the food in Peru was good, you haven't been to this place in Mexico. Like, if that's your title, somebody has to click on that. They say, okay, I know the food in Peru is good. Why is this place in Mexico better? And yeah. So title and thumbnail, you have to create curiosity. So, like, for example, if you are in channel, I brought it up for you. What here's something you can do to improve straight off the bat. So on your thumbnail, you have Johnny Hoddle. So you have the big words Johnny Hoddle on the thumbnail. For the title, you don't need to use Johnny Hoddle's name because you've already mentioned it on the thumbnail. So the way that it works is if somebody knows Johnny Hoddle, if they see his name written and his photo on the thumbnail, they're going to click on the video. But if somebody doesn't know Johnny Hoddle and they're not going to click on the video because of Johnny Hoddle, then the way I look at it is you have an extra 100 characters in your written title that is taking another swing at the baseball, trying to convince somebody who doesn't know Johnny Hoddle to click on that video with Johnny Hoddle. So that's where you try to maximize your title, and I wouldn't use his name again.
Not use the name at all
No,
of the guest?
So if you use the name of the guest on the thumbnail, don't use it in the title.
You're going to have a podcast without having the guest name in the title?
Yeah, I do all the time. So if you have the guest's photo and the guest's name written on the thumbnail, you don't need to include it in the title, because in the description of the YouTube video, you're obviously going to put links to the guest's, Twitter account, website. You're going to have their name in the description. So from an SEO standpoint, you're taking care of having their name in the description of the YouTube video. But yeah, so yeah, I look at it. You get 100 characters in your title. You are trying to maximize the opportunity to try to force somebody to click on that video who doesn't know the guest.
Yeah. No, I get it. Definitely makes sense. We'll hit you up offline maybe for some more tips or something. But I personally, when I listen to podcasts and stuff, I enjoy hearing case studies. I was listening to a podcast today with a couple marketers, and one of them was like critiquing the other guy's stuff, and it was actually like pretty valuable. So hopefully people enjoy listening to that. But cool. I realized we didn't totally get into hearing about like living on Bitcoin day to day. I guess we don't have time to get into it, but if someone wanted to get started or start YOLOing into maybe 50% of their net worth in Bitcoin, like how would you go about that, or what kind of general tips do you have in terms of getting someone onboarded?
So first thing always comes down to education. So like Bitcoin, a lot of people get focused on the volatility of Bitcoin, but it doesn't matter what time frame you look at. Going all in on Bitcoin is the best economic decision you could have made. It's the best performing asset in history. It's the best performing asset of 2023. It's the best performing asset since 2020. And yes, Bitcoin's still down 40% from its all-time high in 2021. But if you've been dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin from the very peak at $69,000, if you hypothetically bought $50 of Bitcoin every single day since its peak, so the worst possible time, you're in the green today. Yeah. So you're actually in profit. So from an economic standpoint, there's no real arguments for not having a significant portion of your net worth in Bitcoin, because economically it's outperformed absolutely everything. But
and
then Bitcoin,
where should I hold it? Where should I hold it? I get that it's good. Where do I hold it?
You do not hold it on an exchange. So the biggest catchphrase you hear in Bitcoin is not your keys, not your coins. So if you have Bitcoin on exchange, it's not yours. And we saw what happened in 2022 when the largest exchanges in Bitcoin all decided to run away with people's Bitcoin. So BlockFi, Celsius, FTX, that should give you all the information you need to know. Don't trust third parties. So get your own wallets. You can have your own. You can download a wallet on your phone, on any phone you've got.
What's your go-to wallet?
Super simple one is probably Blue Wallet is great.
Blue Wallet, I haven't heard of that.
Blue Wallet's good. A wallet of Satoshi is actually probably the easiest one for a beginner, because you could put Bitcoin in that wallet. And when you spend the Bitcoin, Wallet of Satoshi is actually going to spend it as a Lightning transaction. So you
Wallets
won't,
of Satoshi.
yeah, definitely check that out.
Okay, I see it.
Because when the transaction fees are high, like they are today, they're about $5. If you have a wallet that just manually manages on-chain Bitcoin and Lightning Bitcoin, it's a lot easier to help newer people. So, Wallet of Satoshi is great. It's funny, I'm actually working with another Bitcoin company that's about to launch what we're calling the all-in-one Bitcoin application. So that's the Satoshi app. I personally use that, but we're still in beta, so we're not live with that. But yeah, I mean, like, taking custody of your Bitcoin, it's a beautiful thing. And like, you can literally download a wallet on the App Store in 30 seconds, and anyone around the world can now send you Bitcoin in 10 seconds instantly for zero fees, and the government doesn't know you own it. Like, that is a pretty revolutionary thing. How
If
can
it goes straight to a wallet instead
Yep,
of an exchange.
exactly. Yep. And that's the real way to use Bitcoin, peer to
And how
peer.
can it go straight to the wallet? Because the wallet's on the blockchain?
Yeah. So you'll download a wallet, wallet of Satoshi. You'll press on one button that says receive, and that wallet is going to generate you an address that's on the
Okay.
Bitcoin blockchain, and you control that address and that wallet.
Okay, got it. This is great. So I think what we should do is like a LatAm Bitcoin roundtable episode at some point. You, Johnny Hoddle, like we talked about, maybe Andrew Howard, who put together Mi Primera Bitcoin in Mexico. Have you ever connected with those guys?
Andrew's a great friend of mine. I love him. He's a legend. But I haven't met Johnny Hoddle. I pinged him a message actually after your chat with him last week, and
Uh
I
huh.
said, "Hey, it's cool you're working in the Bitcoin space. Anyone I might have known, but I haven't met him personally."
Okay, cool. So you know Andrew, that's
Yeah,
good. And those guys. Trying to think who else. Maybe Joel Valenzuela, who's been living on Bitcoin for like 10 years. Cool guy.
yeah.
Um, and we'll see who we can put together. You down?
I would 100% be down, because I think there's so many digital nomads in the space, and like, Bitcoin is just the obvious answer if you're a digital nomad. Like, it makes life so easy. Most nomads are opposed to government regulations and taxation, and Bitcoin just fixes that. So I think it'd be a brilliant idea. I'd be more than happy to join a little Bitcoin roundtable.
Yeah, I truly believe that Bitcoin and crypto is. I am technological or technical. Like I know how to program in Python and JavaScript and stuff like that, but I've just never gone off on the deep end in crypto. Like I have like a little bit, obviously, but I've never made it like a huge major pillar of my sovereign plan and what we talk about on My Latin Life. And I think we need to do more of that in the future. So we'll definitely have to put that roundtable together.
Now's the perfect time to do that. We got the Bitcoin halving happening in 2024. And for anyone who doesn't know, they might be tuning in. They're a little bit crypto curious. Every single time Bitcoin has a halving, every 4 years, price typically goes absolutely bananas in the 12 to 18 months following the halving. And that's just simple, economics. When the supply of something gets cut in half and you have the same amount of demand or transactions happening, price has to go up. So I think, delving into Bitcoin now, it'll be great for your listeners in 12 to 18 months time. They'll be prepared.
Say it one more time for me. The halving is bananas.
Fucking bananas in an Australian accent. I'm
uh,
sorry.
no, I love it. So, Luke, why don't you take this time, call to action, speak directly to the audience's soul, tell them where they can uh, get in contact with you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, if you think I've been talking shit on today's episode, you can tell me on my Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter, so yeah, please reach out if you want help growing social media or a YouTube channel. It's what I do. I'd be more than happy to drop some more alpha and help you out. So yeah, ping me on Twitter. Making videos on YouTube, and yeah, both places is just my name. Thank you so much for having me today, Vance. It was an absolute pleasure joining you, and I even learned a little bit more. So I really had a blast, and I hope that we provided some sort of value to the listener.
Definitely, bro. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Can't wait to meet you in person one of these days. And we'll be in touch.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, man.